Welcome back. In this lesson we're going to use several different tools to really manipulate and change a photograph. We're going to do 3 different examples. This first one, I found this on pexels.com, and you can find all sorts of great images to use. I just tried to find someone with some little imperfections that we can maybe use the spot healing brush tool in Photoshop to correct a little bit. So I'm going to go back. I got this one right here and I just downloaded it. There's several other ones you can use if this one is not available any longer, but I have this one, and although she is beautiful the way she is, some clients, some people want you to maybe remove something from their face. It's really good to know what's the best method for removing freckles and moles and whatnot. So I have the spot healing brush tool selected here in my toolbar. I'm going to go ahead and select my layer and move in. I can make it a little bit bigger by increasing the brush size right up here. Just going to increase the brush size. I'm going to try to match this little, I guess kind of a white mole there. I'm going to increase the size until I get a good match, right where it's a little bit past the border of the mole. So now all I'm going to do is click once. And what it did is it took an algorithm, it sampled nearby items as we did in the lesson before. It just replaces it automatically with nearby skin samples. And we could do the same thing with this freckle over here. And I have freckles on my face, so I would love to do this to my own skin permanently. So I'm just going around zapping some. You want to keep original characteristics of the person's face. You never want to overdo it and have them lose who they are. So in some cases clients request this, and in some cases you want to try to keep, some imperfections in there if you're doing this for, social media or whatnot. So just kind of a little bit of that redness, maybe some rosacea or some skin issues. I have the same stuff with my skin, and sometimes you may need to reduce the size of the brush if you have something smaller. The smaller the better. You don't want to have to sample too much, because sometimes when you sample, see how it lost a little bit of the texture? See this little dimpling? And when I did that, it took nearby samples, but it didn't quite do the same texture all over. So you have to go as small as you can in terms of the sampling, just enough to cover it. If you do large areas with the spot healing brush tool, sometimes it doesn't work quite as well. So if I just click and hold and do this entire area and then release, you can see how it took nearby samples from up here. But that's not, the skin is very different on the nose than it is on the cheek. So this is more oily and more shine, has more shine to it. So this is really just for tiny spots, to zap. So this was the spot healing brush tool in action. Let's say we want to go ahead and get rid of all this redness here. One thing we could do is we can do this manually. So instead of using the little tool that they have where it automatically takes samples, we could do it ourselves manually with the clone tool. So this is the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to have the clone stamp tool selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Option. And when you hold down Option, and I'll show the Windows equivalent button that you need to press. If you hold down Option, you'll get this little sample. So I can pretty much move this around, and I can click anywhere I want to sample. And I like to click on the nearest skin nearby. So if I have a little bit of the nose here, I'm going to want to sample right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click once. I'm still holding down that Option key. So I took my sample. So now you can kind of see a preview of what it would look like if I started to paint with this brush. So it took a sample. So now I can go down here and I could start to kind of paint on, and you can see this little addition sign at the top. That is the spot, or little crosshairs, I guess you could say. That's the spot where it's sampling. So you can see how it's taking an exact copy right there. And you can go back and take another sample. So if I want to take a sample of this area. And what I find with the clone tool is a lot of times you'll have to take lots of samples and fill it in, almost like painting a picture. So I may want to take a sample from down here to get that color and paint it on. But instead of painting 100%, so you see where they're clashing, I like to blend it a little bit. So I'm just going to go up to my opacity. And so this is basically your transparency. It's going to make it more opaque. So I'm going to cut it in half so it's not full strength. There's a little bit of transparency. And so now it'll blend a little bit better. It's going to bring some of the top and the bottom together. So I'm going to hold down Option on the top, blend that together, make a sample on the bottom, hold down Option. Going to get my sample. I just clicked once, release, and then paint. And I find this a little bit of a better method because it helps kind of blend it in. So you see how it's a little bit awkward down there, and this is where it really becomes an art to do. And some are easier than others. This is a pretty tough picture because I didn't have a lot of samples to choose from. And Photoshop with the spot healing brush tool and some other content aware tools are becoming better with their algorithm to help you do this automatically. So this will be a thing of the past, but just in case you don't have access to the content aware tools, maybe you're using an older version of Photoshop, or you really want to do some fine details, you can always use the clone stamp tool. That's always an option. You can do it manually. The next tool you can use to really change an original photo and manipulate it further is the Liquify tool. And this is an incredibly powerful and fun tool to use. This is probably what a lot of the Instagram stars use, and sometimes they don't use it very effectively when they try to make themselves skinnier, or they make themselves bigger, or they try to change their bodies. This is what they use. Is called the Liquify tool. So we're going to do it with an animal this time. So we're going to make this animal really dramatic, almost a little bit more like a cartoon animal. So we're going to go up to get to the Liquify tool. You're going to go up to Filter. It's going to be right down here in the menu system. So let's go ahead and click on Liquify, Filter, Liquify. And you're going to have a lot of options here. Some of these are going to be grayed out because it's an animal, and so it's not going to automatically detect a face. It only detects human faces. So this face aware Liquify options will be grayed out, and we're going to do one where we do a human. So don't worry. So don't even worry about that. So we're going to just focus on the basic tools here for Liquify. We're going to go over these one at a time. So there's the forward warp tool. So forward warp, I can click and drag, and it's going to bring all the pixels with me on my brush. So I can click on this eye and bring it forward, and it's going to kind of shift it all the way. You can kind of see everything moving as I click and hold. And you could change the size of your brush right here in the brush options. So if I only want to drag a little bit, I can drag a little bit. Or if I want to get a big old brush, I can drag the whole thing up, just like this. You can see kind of the effect of it, kind of drag forward. And so the pressure, if I reduce the pressure right here below size, it's only going to kind of bring it a little bit. It's going to apply a very light pressure to it. If I increase the pressure and have a heavy pressure and click and drag, it's really going to be dramatic, and it's going to bring it much higher. So in this case, we're going to go down to the pucker and bloat tools. I believe it's the fifth and the sixth one down in the menu system. So let's do pucker. Pucker is going to be just like you pucker up your lips. It's going to suck everything inwards. So if I pucker on the eye, it's going to bring it all in. And this is a great way to make things skinnier and smaller. So if you're doing a body, doing this will really kind of almost suck the fat away if you're doing it to a leg. So if we're doing it to an animal, it can make their eyes smaller. So I'm going to reduce the size. So I'm going to decrease the size of that brush a little bit. And so you can make the eyes smaller. Or if you want to do the opposite, which is what we want to do, we want to have a really dramatic cartoon look, we're going to do right underneath the bloat tool. And this is going to make everything big and blow up like a balloon. So we're going to go over the eye and click and hold, and then click and hold. And you have this really big cartoon-like eye going on here. And so you'll notice when I do this, the nose is affected. And I really just want the eyes to get bigger. You know, how do I do this tool and just affect the eye? Well, first of all, you can decrease the size, and it kind of helps. But what I want to do is block certain areas from being affected. So let's go ahead and bring that down. And there's something you can do. It's called the freeze mask tool. It's right down here. We can paint on areas that we don't want to be affected by the tools up here. So let's say I don't want the nose to be affected. I just want the eyes to be affected. So I can kind of paint around here, and the red indicates that it will not be affected by the tool. So I can paint around there, and then I can go back with my bloat tool. I can bloat the eyes a little bit. Let's make it bigger. And I don't have to worry about everything else being affected. So this can be really handy if you're just not wanting to affect maybe the background. You don't want the background to bloat too. You just want the eyes to bloat. So making it nice big eyes. And then you can unfreeze. So how you unfreeze is you go to the Thaw Mask tool. That's right below the Freeze Mask tool, and you can just basically click and it'll remove it. So the nose was not affected, so the nose is not warped or distorted in any way, just the eyes are distorted. So we can try that again. We can freeze maybe the background We just want to maybe make the ears a little bit bigger, the body a little bit bigger. You can also isolate this from the background too, so that you don't have the background involved in all of this. That's another thing you could do. And there's one I want to go over too. We're not going to use it as much in this case, but the twirl, this will literally, if you click and hold, it'll just like really twist it. So that might come in handy if you just want to slightly tweak a face. But I don't use this one as much, but it can come in handy when you're doing some really cool background textures. If you have big blocks of color, you can twist them and make really cool patterns and background textures. So let's go back up to the top tool. This is the forward warp tool again. We have quite a big size on that brush, a lot of pressures. Let me just kind of have a middle of the road pressure and kind of a middle size. We could just make adjustments, bring out that ear. So there's our little funny cartoon eyes. So that was before, and this is after, kind of making it more cartoony and kind of funny. So that is kind of the basics of the Liquify tool. We're going to bring in a human face so we can use kind of how it automatically detects a face, and you can do all sorts of amazing things. So I'll see you in the next lesson.